Welcome back into the Lions247 Podcast. Happy to have you with us. And in a moment, we're going to get to a familiar guest here on the podcast. I think he's been on with us 4 or 5 times, dating back to his high school career. It's Landon Tengwall, former top 100 overall recruit, part of that Penn State 2021 recruiting class, came to campus, emerged as a starter. Unfortunately, had to step away from football last August during preseason camp due to some medical issues. We had Landon on this podcast during the winter to really open up about his retirement, what's next for him. He remains a Penn State student. He's very actively engaged in a lot of different stuff here in Happy Valley. So we're going to pick up that conversation. We'll check back in with what's going on with Landon right now. But I think a big overarching theme you'll pick up here in the conversation is picking the brain of a guy who's been through a summer as a Nittany Lion. We're in a point of the calendar year right now in July where we are not, as reporters, going to be getting a lot of access to players. There's not a lot of stuff to cover out there on the field. That will change in a big way come the first week of August. Preseason camp starts. We're on the practice fields. We're locked and loaded all the way through bowl season. But right now, we're going to get a chance to talk to Landon Tengwall about what July is like around team facilities individually for players as they try to prepare for preseason camp and the anxiety and the excitement that can develop from that wait. And additionally, we'll get some perspective on all the stuff we've been discussing on this podcast lately, the prospect camps, the commitments. What is summer like for an emerging recruit on the college football circuit? Landon Tengwall certainly knows what that's about. And we'll finish up with him on some key questions regarding several topics as preseason camp approaches for his former squad. Without further ado, Landon Tengwall returns to the Lions247 Podcast. What's going on, my friend?
What's up, Tyler? Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Of course. We're happy to get you back on board. As I said, leading up to this, you and I spent a lot of time on the last appearance with you on this podcast, breaking down your retirement, where you're from. I encourage people to check that out. We've got an article about that. But let's just bring it up to speed. How's your summer been? How's life as a Penn State student these days? And how are you continuing to, I guess, adjust 1 year later after your retirement?
Yeah, it's always hard. It's always difficult stepping away. But I will say, I was just talking to someone about this the other day. It is fun to be able to go on weekend trips or just spontaneous, hey, let's go down to Ocean City or something like that. And sure, I can do it. Because before it was always, oh, no. It was always, no, I can't do that. Oh, I got football. I got practice. So there is that side of it. It is, a little bit more fun. Obviously, there's a ton of things I miss just being a part of the team and things like that. But it is fun. And I really have enjoyed creating content. You can check out my YouTube channel or any of my social media. It's just Landon Tengwall. So I've had a really good time doing a ton of stuff with the guys. I do actually have a golfing video coming out. I think I've talked about it a little bit, but finally took Drew Aller, Dom DeLuca, Tyler Warren. We all went golfing, put GoPros on the carts. We had cameramen. It was a good old time. We played a 2-man scramble. So doing more of that stuff, kind of showcasing our guys' personality. But I'm excited, man. Excited, ramping up for the season. And I know everybody's excited to get into this. But today's going to be fun. I love giving insight, and this is kind of my type of stuff. What we're talking about, what does the summer look like? What does July look like for these players? So I'm excited to get into it today, Tyler.
Give us your best tease from that golfing foursome. What are we staying tuned for
man,
your podcast channel?
Well, let's see. It's Drew Aller can knock the snot out of the ball. So if you want to see some of that's good. I mean, Tyler Warren's pretty good too. And so was everybody was pretty good. I had an okay performance. It was me and Drew versus Tyler and Dom, but it was funny. It was close at the end. I'll leave it at that. So you got to tune in, but it's some good golf. I will say the guys were hitting some good balls, and we got some good players on the team. So I'm hopefully doing some more of that stuff with them because a lot of the guys like to golf now. Ever since NIL started, I'd say half the team probably golfs. And guys day by day are picking it up. My boy Nick Dawkins just picked it up. Tyler Elsdon. Everybody's starting to come on board. So and it's fun. You get to go out there with the guys, and there's so many different groups. And now you say, you just build a random foursome, guys you normally wouldn't really hang out with, and now you're playing golf with them. So it is really fun.
Sounds like there's some serious muscle heading to the courses of Happy Valley then, and in the coming weeks as summer concludes. And I'm really excited for this because I think the first time you and I really had a conversation was maybe after your big man challenge appearance. I think going into your high school career, and Penn State was really quick to offer you. You were the first 2021 lineman they ended up offering. So we're kind of coming full circle again here. I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years later regarding kind of where we're at. And I want to get to the recruiting angle in a second and what these camps mean and kind of what players are getting worked through. But let's discuss the current Nittany Lions. We are now less than 4 weeks away from them getting back onto the practice fields, engaging with us at media day. and then really putting all that focus into preparation for an August 31st kickoff at West Virginia and everything that lies ahead. So, Landon, what exactly is on the priority list? I'd imagine there is some attention toward making sure you're a bit rested at this time of year, but overall, what is July like for Nittany Lions?
Yeah, you're right there. July is definitely kind of that get your legs back under you, getting ready for the season, because June is an absolute grind. I don't think you probably don't have a single day off in June, meaning, an extra day. You have 5 days a week. You get the 2 days off, Saturday and Sunday. But outside of those Saturdays and Sundays in June, there are no days off. I mean, that is when you're pushing. You do like test week where you test how strong your power clean, your bench, your squat is 40 times, like all that stuff. So June is really it's hectic on the body. So you come in July 4th, you get some time off. And then normally it kind of depends on the college, but most colleges, either the week before camp starts or 2 weeks before camp starts, you get a whole nother week off. So there is kind of an emphasis in July of making sure, hey, you need to rest, get your muscles, get your legs back under you. But I think there also is a fine line to walk. And some guys will cross that line where it's rest too much, not working out enough, not eating what you're supposed to be eating. And when you give guys that freedom, especially younger cats, it is easy for them to come back. And they were, really close. Let's say all of June worked really hard, and you wanted them to get up to 250 and they were 230, and they got up to, 245. Well, they went home, didn't really eat, was doing whatever, and they lost all that weight again. So you have to be careful that you are not making those type of mistakes while you are taking some time off and allowing yourself to kind of recuperate. But there are those little things, and not obviously other things, not doing dumb stuff, just making sure you stay away from any of those dumb things that are going on. You know how it goes. Unfortunately, we've seen some stuff in the media recently. So guys are constantly being reminded by the coaches, by their families, hey, just make smart decisions while you have this time off. Because normally guys you're so busy, you barely even have time to do anything like that. So it's nice though. Guys get to go home. They get to see their families, especially if you're somewhere in the vicinity of close to Penn State. But it's definitely still a grind the weeks that you are here. And like coming up right now, I was talking to a couple of the boys yesterday. Chuck Losey and the strength crew definitely getting after them. So don't worry, they are still working very hard.
I can verify that as well. It was I believe it was the final 7-on-7 tournament that Penn State hosted in June. They had 3 of them in total. And that whole event went into a heat delay. I mean, you remember that crazy heat wave we got? It was like, I don't know, it felt like it was 105 degrees. I don't know what the real temperature was. So we were in a heat delay. I'm in Haluba Hall, kind of camped out, waiting for things to resume. Take a look out onto the practice fields. There's Chuck Losey leading a group of dozens of Penn State players through what looked like wind sprints on the turf field out back. So there was no break for them. Can you tell us, because I think people are so fixated on June recruiting. There's so much happening. There's all the official visit weekends. There's all these camps. Meanwhile, the current team is building and building and building. What exactly goes into those days in June, and why are they so important?
Yeah, so just to kind of give you an idea of how the schedule is, it's normally about 3 days of running, 2 days of lifting. So let's say you come in Monday, and it's kind of an easier run day where you are working. One day you might be working more long-term running, so you're not as explosive. It's worrying about that, 50-yard dash, like just longer. And the other day is quick burst stuff like that. So you come in Monday, get some work in for about an hour and a half, and you can do other stuff. Normally you do position work after the runs. Normally each team, you do the run for about hour and a half. The offensive line will get together and, hey, let's do some work on the pads. Let's do some pass pro. And then come in Tuesday. Then you lift on Tuesday. Same thing. Might go get some work afterwards at the position group. And then Wednesday, depends on the team. Wednesday or Thursday, you might mix it up. But one of those days is the conditioning day, and that's when it gets really hectic. That is when it is, you can run in hills. You're doing sled pushes. I mean, you're running in the stadium. It could be a million different things, but it is pretty difficult. And I'll tell you, if you drive past University, if you're on University at the right time and you pass Haluba on your left, if anybody knows what I'm talking about, and the BJC's on your right, that big hill, you might catch the guys running up the hill. And sometimes the coaches, they have to stop traffic for us to run across from Haluba over to the basketball hill. So you'll see, you can catch us out there working. You might see us on a campus run around campus. That does happen a couple times during the summer. But for the most part, it's normally run, workout, run on Friday. And then Friday morning, you wake up and have an early run lift combo, get done at like 6 a.m. And that's the nice part. Guys love getting done early on Fridays because then you have the whole weekend to yourself. You can either, if you live in somewhere like Maryland, like me, you could go home for the weekend. But it also just allows you to have that whole extra day freed up. And everybody knows it feels good to work out in the morning and have that whole day, that whole weekend to yourself. So that's kind of how it shakes up. But the guys love it. It is the most time you get to yourself and get to hang out with your teammates. That's really when the bonds and relationships are being built. When you're going through those there are some tough moments, almost as tough as the season from a standpoint of you feel like you're going to fall over and pass out, and you got your guy next to you holding you up, just saying, come on, one more rep. We got this. Let's do this together. And so it definitely builds that teamwork and trusting that guy next to you, I will say. And then it's fun. You get to go hang out. You're hanging out at guys' places. You're going to pool parties. You're just hanging out, playing video games, doing stuff like that. So it's a great time. And it definitely is one of the favorite times of the year.
You mentioned the guys who are kind of taking on the responsibility of helping guys finish strong and stay on their feet. I know you're a little removed from the locker room, but you're not that removed from the locker room. You've got your finger on the pulse in a lot of ways. Who are those voices this summer? We haven't heard any announced captains yet. That'll come in August, I'm sure. But when it's time to step up and either give some tough love or just some serious love and a hug maybe, who is making sure that they're heard on this Penn State team right now and through those difficult workouts in June?
Yeah, I'll give you one name for sure is Nick Dawkins, going to be the starting center this year. And that is someone who has been a Penn State dude through and through since he has been here. I think a lot of people are excited to see him finally get his opportunity. It looked like he was going to last year, and then Hunter Norzad decided to come back, which was obviously very good for that offensive line. But he is more than ready, and he is definitely one of the leaders of this team. So that is someone that you are definitely constantly hearing his voice throughout that type of workout. Guys like Dom DeLuca, Tyler Warren are definitely making sure guys are getting through that workout, motivated, and staying behind them, making sure everybody kind of falls in line. Because during those summer workouts, the football coaches aren't out there. It's just the strength coaches, and there's 4 or 5 of them, and obviously they're going to keep the groups in line. Like you don't mess around with Chuck Losey, but you kind of need those veteran players to be there to make sure, hey, they see something. Hey, let's pick it up. Let's go. We're not doing any of that. We're not allowing any of that stuff to go on, bending over, stuff like that. So it's good. You got to have those veteran leaders. And I also think summer is a time, especially when you lose a lot of those senior leaders. For example, like after the Rose Bowl, when we lost Jair Brown, PJ Mustipher, Sean Clifford, like all those guys, it's kind of like, okay, like who's gonna step up? Like you're looking around, and summer is really that time because the coaches aren't around, and that's when you develop the respect for the player that's going to lead your position. And it's like, if I don't develop that respect for him over the summer, it that can leak into the football season. And then there could be tensions with that. So I think it's really important especially if you are going to take that leadership role for your position or for a team, that has to come out in the summer. And so those young guys have to see that, and that will allow them to fall in line and say, I'm going to follow this guy now and throughout the season.
You mentioned Sean Clifford. You spent a couple years with him as the starting quarterback. Before him, we got to know Trace McSorley really well. Both of those guys put on public display kind of a fiery side. And I know that it's something that showed up during these workouts away from the spotlight. It was part of who they were in their DNA. Can you peel back the curtain just a bit for us on Drew Aller? Aside from him smashing the ball on the golf course, I think a lot of us are still picturing the big kid, the big kid who came here from high school, powerful arm and everything, but kind of a big kid. Do you think here in year 3, second year as a starting quarterback, he is in position to be more of a commanding presence? And how does he go about doing that, in your opinion?
Yeah, I definitely think he does. And I think each day that he comes in and works, he gets more and more respect from the guys. I mean, he's someone, he grinds, he puts his head down. But, I think that's over time. It's just being comfortable. It's getting more and more comfortable. He is now coming into his second year starting. I think that is going to be huge for him, just already getting that year under his belt. And it's like, okay, I kind of know what to expect now. I understand what is expected of me. And he knows. I mean, he knows that this year he is expected to be a top 5 guy and very well could leave for the NFL draft with that type of year. So it's definitely not lost on Drew. He knows what the expectations are. So I just think it's a matter of now turning that around and putting that production on the field. And I think the biggest factor of all of this really is going to be Andy Kotelnicki. Can he put his guys at an advantage, find a way to put the defense at a disadvantage with pre-snap motion? And we've heard all of it. We heard Caden Saunders say that we've only seen 5% of the offense after the spring game. So I am really excited for that. I think there cannot be enough emphasis put on how much an offensive coordinator means to a quarterback. So, and it's also like that freshness. When you bring in a new playbook, I've talked about this before. I wasn't really here for Kirk Soraka, but it wasn't that much of a change over from what he was running to Mike Yurcich. And we thought there was going to be, it was like, okay, Oklahoma State, big time. And it just didn't really have that feel to it. But I can promise you this is a much different offense. It's going to look very different. And for players, for Drew especially, that's refreshing. That's like, okay, cool. Let's do something new. Let's get into this. I'm really excited. It gets guys excited and really wanting to do stuff. When you keep running the same plays over and over, it gets kind of bland. There's nothing that's getting the guys hyped up, really wanting to go. It's like, okay, I don't know. But now, so I am really excited for Andy Kotelnicki. I think that is I did a list where it was like the top 5 or top 10 most important players to Penn State. And I said, forget the players. I said, Andy Kotelnicki is number 1 on that list, just because I feel like it's all going to come down to him. Can he get the guys can he get his playmakers the ball in space? Can Nick Singleton, we saw it towards the end of the year, getting him in space a little bit. It was really struggling with that early in the season. Kind of had played, got out in the slot, played out some wide receiver positions, worked out well, had some pretty big explosive plays. So I am really excited to see how that's progressing. But I definitely think from a standpoint of Drew as a person, he's understanding, okay, got to be more and more of a leader, got to step up. And, everybody and guys aren't going to completely change their personality. We know that Drew is not Sean Clifford. Sean was a very fiery, is going to yell, going to do all that stuff. That's Sean. That's just simply not Drew. I don't think someone's going to completely change their personality, but I think he is understanding when I have to speak up, when I have to, have that poise, when I have to have that composure, and the guys are going to look to me to lean on me because I am the starting quarterback coming into year 2. So like I said, he definitely understands what is at stake here. Now he's got to see, can he, the offense, can we put this all together? And one other thing that not too many people are talking about is this young offensive line. Very different look this year, especially losing, obviously, the center, but losing both tackles. And you're going to have 2 guys in there that haven't really started much, whichever way you swing it, whether it's Drew Shelton, Javen Williams, Nolan Rucci, Anthony Donka, whoever it is, it's going to be a new, younger guy at both spots. I think, obviously, we know what we had in Olu Fashanu, but Caden Wallace was criminally underrated this past year. We are definitely going to feel that a little bit, especially early on the season when a young offensive line is still trying to mesh. So that is also something to keep an eye on as Drew's protection headed into the beginning of the season.
Yeah, fantastic insight. You touched on a lot of bases there. I do want to go a little deeper on what you said about Andy Kotelnicki, and you mentioned Phil Trautwein. During June, during this span in the summer, how much are coaches relaying messages to players? How much of that is being executed? Because there's restrictions and what you can actually do together on the field, and that comes off in August. You'll have regular practice sessions. But how much communication is there between the coaching staff and the players during the summer? And what exactly does that communication look like, and how is it important?
Yeah, so just to kind of give you a rundown of how the coaches can communicate, the whole month of May, you can obviously call your guys, you talk to them, but you don't see them really. I don't think there's any rules about going over to the coach's house or anything, but you're not doing drills, you're not meeting anywhere. You got that whole month off. Now you come back in June, they're allowed to do stuff with you. They can be, if you say, hey, coach, I want to go do some drills, they're allowed to go out there, do that type of stuff. But I would say that's where the coaches kind of see where's the initiative from the players. Is, for example, Drew Aller, is he seeking out Andy Kotelnicki to go, hey, coach, let's go meet again. Hey, you want to meet tomorrow? Let's really get this down pat. So there's a lot more of that. Now you're able to get together. There is some like team skill instruction that within the past 2 years, I think, got approved, where during the summer, in the months of June and July, you can kind of get together in the mornings or whatever. You find a little bit of time each week. I think it's like 2 hours is the cap. And there's no football allowed either. Like, there's very specific rules. You can't have a football involved, but you can do like an on-air team activity where it's defense, going against trash cans, offense, lining up against some fake dummies, and run some plays with the full team with the coaches there, like that type of thing. So it's nice to feel that out. You start to get a little bit of a feel, but you really, truly can't understand what you have as far as players, as far as the plays, how they are doing with the new offense until you put the pads on. But it's nice. It's nice to, like I said, to see what the players are trying to seek out. I say that's the biggest thing from the summer is I talked about it. The players have the most time to themselves throughout the whole summer. So the coaches are kind of seeing, okay, they're keeping their eye out. They're looking out. That ledge up there, like Coach Franklin's and all the coaches, they have a ledge that can come out from their office and they can see onto the practice fields. They're peeking out there. Who's getting that extra work? Who's hitting me up to, let's look at some film. Let's talk about these plays. Like, trust me, they are keeping an eye on that. And that matters when it comes to position battles, when it comes to, what I am expecting from a player this season. They take note of that stuff throughout the summer, just because there's so much more free time. You kind of have that free will in the summertime where it's like, okay, I kind of get to do what I want a little bit. And it's kind of a weird feeling for college football players, just because we're on such a schedule. So I think that's where the coaches kind of take some time to almost step back and say, okay, let's see who takes the initiative here. But yeah, I'm really just excited to see. Everybody loves Koto Nittany. Definitely, I'm a big fan of him. I've talked to him a couple times. Really cool dude. But I've heard this motions, that type of stuff. Let's see how much we can put defenses at a disadvantage this year, and I think that just will in turn just help Drew Aller out immensely. But once again, what I talked about, we had a pretty good running game last year with the offensive line we had. Drew Aller needs to have a good run game to be able to fall back on, to really be elite and play to his full potential this year. So I know I'm an offensive lineman, and people are probably saying he's just bringing it back to the offensive line because that's him. But I really do feel like that is going to be a big variable this year. Can they play similar to how we played last year, protecting him, allowing Drew to have a run game, and then in turn that allows Andy Koto Nittany to be able to open up that playbook even more and more and say, hey, I'm comfortable. My guys can protect. They know how to block all these, different elaborate runs. Let's keep opening this thing up and add more and more.
A couple episodes ago on this podcast, we spent time sorting through the offensive depth chart, trying to sort through those storylines that are really important in August. And the one that is so fun, and Phil Trautwein was on the record with me in June saying he's probably the best freshman that he's encountered as a college football coach in an offensive line room, is Cooper Cousins. Because there's a lot of attention being paid at tackle. And you mentioned a mix of veterans and younger players that are involved in each of those spots. And then you've got Nick Dawkins looking to lock things down at center. But you got Cooper Cousins, who with Sal Wormley on the sideline in the spring game was the starting right guard. And we've heard that he's going to continue to push Dawkins at center. How different is this? I mean, you lived in the offensive line world. You were a freshman offensive lineman. You were a top 100 recruit like Cooper Cousins currently is getting to campus. So how rare is it to hear the feedback that we've gotten? And do you have anything to add to the buzz on Cooper Cousins?
Yeah, excuse me. I'm a big fan of Cooper Cousins. I've known him for a long time. I think since he was like a freshman, sophomore. I would always watch him at the camps. He was always locking dudes down. So when he finally came in, I was really excited about him. One thing I will say is I remember my spring ball. Dude, I remember Franklin had to come up to me and say, hey, it's going to be okay. When a head coach has to come up to you and say that, it's not good. I remember like my first practice, we do a start fast period, and we go one-on-ones. It's the first padded practice. And Smith Vilbert at this time, I think he's going in his fourth year, and I'm a freshman. And they blow the whistle. I get pancaked, put right on my back, whole team going crazy. And I just, I think back to that. It was just such a rough spring ball, just from a physicality standpoint, because it is so different going against 16, 15-year-old dudes, and now turn around and I'm going against Smith Vilbert, who's, 20 years old. So it's definitely that transition is difficult. To see Cooper Cousins excel and do so well so quickly, and not only is he doing a really good job, but he doesn't really MA that much. Like, that's the feedback I've gotten. Like, he understands, and that's what I've seen too. Like, he understands that I need to know where I'm going. That's one of the biggest thing with the freshmen. They just make these dumb mistakes where it's like, why? Like, come on, you got to be a little bit better than that. And the coaches understand, hey, you're a freshman. But when those freshmen are not making those type of mistakes, the coaches take notice. So I think that's one thing from Cooper Cousins is not only is he doing a good job, but he's keeping those MAs, those missed assignments, to a very small minimum. And I think that's going to allow him to push for some serious playing time. He is big. He is ready to go from a physical standpoint. He's now getting there mentally. I definitely think he's going to push Nick Dawkins for some playing time. We will absolutely see him early on against like Bowling Green. Those games, we're definitely going to see him in there. But who knows? I mean, this is something where later in the season, if he's playing really well, he can, I don't know if you really want to be splitting a center playing time. You can kind of do that with guard or tackle, but you don't want to mess up that snap with the quarterback. So I'm interested to see how that's handled. But I think he's going to play a lot, Tyler. I could see him maybe burning his red shirt. And who knows? He can, like we said, he played at guard. You don't know what's going to happen at guard. Guys have been banged up. Sal Wormley's in his 6th year. Might want to take some load off of him. So Cooper Cousins could see some more action at right guard, too, throughout the season.
It's going to be fun to follow. And it's just different to have this conversation about an offensive lineman during year one on campus. And while we're on the subject of freshmen, you were a January enrollee. So was Cooper Cousins. How much different is this time of year, the final push toward preseason camp, and maybe the start of preseason camp for the freshmen who've been around since January versus the group that got to campus in either May or June? I know you've been part of the January class. You've seen the other guys in a couple different cycles come to campus in the summer. Just how stark is that experience, one versus the other?
Yeah, I definitely think the confidence level and like that anxiety that you were talking about earlier, that settles it a little bit. When you were here for that spring ball, you know what to expect from practice, from the coaches, kind of how you're going to be treated on the field, and really what it takes. You see it from the older guys. You're able to have that visual view. Okay, I understand. When you come in June, it's a little bit different because, one, the coaches aren't really here as much. You're not getting, when you come in January, it is boom, it's at you. And it's difficult, but it is worth it once you get through that spring ball and you can kind of breathe a little bit. And then you can start to take stuff back in and kind of reabsorb everything because there was so much being thrown at you. But when you come in June, the coaches aren't around as much. You kind of eke through, you get to late July, and it's like some guys still don't even have that good of a grasp on a playbook. So I do think, not to say that if you come in June, you're going to struggle. You definitely can't contribute as a freshman. I think Jahan Dotson, I think Parker Washington, those are, wide receivers, so it's a little bit different. I think they
Carter, not too long ago.
Abdul Carter, exactly. Yeah, there's plenty of guys. So not to say that it's not going to happen. I don't follow recruiting super close, but I believe we have a wide receiver that's pretty good that's coming that I think recently got here in June. So people are asking me, hey, how much of an impact can he have? I will say, though, I think at a non-physical position, it is a lot easier to have that impact quickly. So a wide receiver, a DB, something like that, because it's not that physicality change isn't as different. But yeah, I definitely think it just takes guys a little bit longer. You didn't have that playbook. You didn't have those reps in the spring. So you go into that summer camp, and if you got here in January, it's like, all right, I know what to expect. I got some confidence rolling in. I feel good about this. But if I'm, a freshman that just got here, it's like I'm anxiety riddled. I don't really know what to expect. First padded practice, you get your head blown off. You're like, well, where did that even come from? That's what it kind of feels like. And everything's moving 1,000 miles per hour versus, it kind of slows down a little bit if you've already been through those 15 practices in the spring. So not to say that those summer guys can't have an impact. It's just a lot more difficult for them to make that transition to college football.
Let's say it's July 31st. You're within 48, 72 hours of the first preseason camp, and it's going to be a big month. I know the perspective may vary if you're an 18-year-old who got to campus in June or if you're a fifth or sixth year guy who has a home in Happy Valley, essentially. But what is on that to-do list for those last 2 or 3 days to make sure that you are at peak preparedness when you get back on the field?
Yeah, I'll throw this out there that no one probably thinks about. A lot of leases around State College end July 31st, and guys have to move around. There's always complications like that. There have been many of guys that had to move during camp. So sometimes, you try to – I almost last year, before everything happened, I almost had to stay – I was in between moves, not going to be able to move into like August 12th, something like that. Me and a couple of my roommates were going to have to stay at someone's house. Like, that is a reality. It can get really difficult because all leases around here go from – because everybody starts to get back in August. Leases go July to July. So, there is that factor of – making sure wherever you're living. That can be stressful. You don't know where you're going to live, figuring that out. But I'd say the little things. Guys like to set up their lockers. Make sure you have all those little things that you need in your locker, those little items that are going to help you do better. A sleeping bag. Some guys will bring in. I've seen even, I got to give a shout out to Hakeem Beeman, who brought in a blow-up mattress to sleep in the locker room because guys don't want to go home during the day in camp. Like it almost feels like a waste to drive home, come back. You only have 2 hours. So my man Hakeem Beeman brought a blow-up mattress, and the locker room's dark because when you walk in, you'll have that morning walkthrough because you can't have 2 days anymore. You got that morning walkthrough. Then you go to lunch, have a little bit of time, and you come back after lunch. The locker room is dark, pitch black, because everybody is just sleeping, trying to get a little bit of rest before practice starts to ramp up. So you see guys bringing in sleeping bags, sleeping on the couches. Like I said, even bringing in blow-up mattresses. So there's those little things that you can help put in your locker to just help throughout camp. You try to do that and take advantage. Get everything squared away just in your personal life. Make sure you don't have too much going on. But yeah, it's definitely different from where you're at. I feel like that confidence level obviously is very different, but it's from a freshman, it's like, okay, I hope I just don't get my head taken off. And then if you go to, Drew Aller, even like Devon Elise, hey, it is an NFL year for me. It is time to perform. You are coming in with that mindset. It starts today. And really, it started way before that, but it truly starts today. So, there's a lot that goes into it. And guys have different rituals that they do. And we always kind of have a team day right before camp starts. It's kind of the start of camp. We'll go have, bowl, whatever, have a nice meal where we get the whole team together, everybody on the staff, everybody's back from vacation, and you kind of just get back around each other, get used to having those meals together because it's going to be a lot of that during the season. You're just getting ready, getting buckled up, and you're kind of enjoying those last couple days before it is time to go, because camp is one of the roughest times of your life, man. As a college football player, there's not a lot of sleep and your body hurts pretty consistently.
Yeah, and then you got to play, 13 games or 12 games in 13 weeks and try to get to a 13th game and a 14th game and a 15th game, and then it's Christmas time, right? So a lot to come once these guys get back on the field in August. And Landon, I do want to circle back for a few preseason topics with you, but switching gears to the recruiting events that have taken place all summer long here in Happy Valley. You've got 3 7-on-7 tournaments. All of them have a big man challenge associated with them for the linemen. You've got a couple different elite prospect showcase camps. And then you've also got official visit weekends happening 4 weekends in a row during the month of June, resulting in a bunch of commitments lately. Let's begin with the camps. I know it's been a while, but when you were a guy who was off the radar and not already in possession of a bunch of Power 5 offers and a big recruiting profile, how did you view those? I mean, you were out and about a lot. I remember you being a very active camp participant at different colleges. What is that process like when you're trying to launch your recruitment to the next level? And how can camp appearances, when you're working in front of staffs, set the stage for you?
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely anxiety riddled, man. When you go in there and it's like, okay, especially if like Coach Franklin, say he comes over and you're doing a one-on-one rep and you see him out of the corner of your eye. You probably pray that you don't see that he's watching, because that puts a lot more pressure on. But if you see Coach Trout, whatever, because at these camps, they bring in tons of coaches from all over, because there's a lot of guys that aren't Penn State level. So they'll bring in smaller D2 coaches and to help coach, but also they want to get their eyes on some lower level guys. So you're not always around Coach Trout or always around, Poindexter if you're a safety. Like, that's not normally how it works. So, when those coaches come around, I will say there is a lot of pressure that you feel when you see them. It's like, okay, let me impress them. Let me do everything exactly right. So there is that anxiety, that pressure. But I'll tell you what, it feels really good when you put a good rep on and you hear Coach Franklin say good rep, something like that. It is, it's really fun, but it's difficult, man. There's 400, sometimes there's 400 plus kids out there for, say, the big man camp. It's not that easy to stand out. But I will say there wasn't many camp. The Penn State 8th grade camp was my first camp, so it kind of put me on a radar a little bit. But I remember we'd go to West Virginia, we'd go to Maryland, and no one really knew who I was at first. So you got to go out there and try to make a name for yourself. Some guys will do that by being really loud and trying to pancake guys and do extra stuff. A lot of the time, coaches don't really like that too much. But if you're doing good and you're doing it, the coaches, they'll cheer it on. They'll be like, all right, I like it. But I will say there is that I remember this specifically. This wasn't a camp, but I remember I came up the following my freshman year for a Rutgers game, and I kind of found my way down to the field. It was my first Penn State game, and I was a freshman. I remember Antonio Alfonso, I think it was something. You remember him? And he was there, and it was like a swarm of coaches around him. It was like there was no interest really in anybody else.
People who don't remember, Alfano was the #1 overall prospect in 24/7 Sports rankings by the end of his high school career in New Jersey. Ended up going to Alabama. His college career didn't really materialize, but he was a heavily wanted man back then.
Yeah, thank you for the context. And I just remember I was sitting there and I'm just like eating my food. I think my dad had to drop me off, so I wasn't even with my dad. And I had to like find my way down to the field. I'm like asking people, I'm like, is this the right tunnel? Like, where am I going? So there is that feeling of like, okay, I'm not really wanted here. It's like, okay, you can't take that personally. The coaches are trying to talk to a million different kids and get eyes on so many different people. But there definitely is that feeling, and I've had it of, like, oh, dang, I'm not really wanted here. I don't know if I should come here, etc. But, you just have to make a good impression, and then, have good conversations with coaches where you impress them. You want to be, a likable guy and hold good conversation. So I definitely think the personality plays a part in it. I mean, Coach Franklin talks about, hey, it's not only the value of this guy or how good he is on the field, but we want to recruit high character dudes. And I will say I have heard that from everybody, especially since NIL has been a thing and fans have gotten to interact with players more. There definitely is that value of having those high character guys, a Nick Dawkins, around the team and around the town. So there's a lot that goes into recruiting, but when you show up for those events, you just pray that you have a good time. And if the coaches come over for 1 second, you are just trying everything in your power to just impress them just a little bit.
Now, there are some campers who are like coming up on their senior season. It's really now or never for them to get on the Nittany Lions radar to be someone that's offerable. And then there are others like you who, by the time you reach your first full summer break as a high school student, you've got an offer. You had one from Penn State before the end of your freshman year. And now we're seeing, I know it's going to sound crazy, but 2027s, 2028s picking up offers in the month of June from Penn State. These are really young players with a long way to go in their recruitment. From what you recall, how does Penn State bridge the gap between an incredibly early offer to a 14 or 15-year-old to actually signing that player 3 years later and getting them in the fold?
Dude, it takes a lot of time. I mean, you got to think, imagine putting in, you offer a guy, let's say his freshman year, and you were waiting till that signing day, his senior year. Sometimes people don't think about how much of a loss it really is, kind of emotionally for these coaches. Imagine putting 3 years into someone and you basically are never going to talk to them again. It's like you had a relationship with the guy and it's just completely over. And it's like that really is hard. It is not, it's difficult. So, that constant communication is the biggest thing. Players have to feel wanted. You have to treat them like a significant other and give them that attention, because if you don't, and I've heard it from many guys, they didn't talk to me for 2-3 months. I lost interest. I mean, that's how it goes. I mean, I can speak personally for Maryland. That was the time when they had a lot of stuff going on. Everybody kind of remembers that, but I didn't talk to them for a year, and they were right up there with Penn State for me. Now, I'll be honest, I was always going to come to Penn State, but they had a lot better of a chance. I didn't talk to them for almost a full year. It was gone. Like, I went back and visited, but I really didn't have any true interest, because it kind of felt like they pushed me to the side. It was like, whatever. So I feel like that is the biggest thing, is making the guys feel wanted. And now we're in a completely different world with NIL, so feel wanted. And then also that cash has to follow it, Tyler. I mean, that is at the end of the day, the biggest thing. I mean, I remember I heard Nick Saban talking about it with his wife, and they said they had an official visit weekend and had the parents over to their house, and his wife, Tammy, she kept saying, all they were asking me is how much money. I remember a couple years ago when it was just about, are you going to make my son a better man, a better football player? So that is what people are asking. How much money do you have to offer? So that is obviously a huge chunk of it, and something that we have struggled a little bit with, but I think it's definitely getting better. And we've seen some of the rules that are coming into place with revenue sharing. So I think it's going to even out a little bit for Penn State. But one thing that we have done a great job with, and you saw this past month, was just fireworks for recruiting. It was really fun to follow. But got to keep stacking that. And I'd say have to get those big time, especially PA recruits, but guys from this East Coast, the DMV guys, those 5 stars. I think we really need to start landing those dudes instead of them going to Ohio State, going to Michigan, and going elsewhere. I know we've done pretty well in PA in the past, but I saw we're struggling a little bit this year. I think the top 8 PA guys, I was scrolling on Twitter this morning and saw that. I don't think we have any of the top 8 guys in PA for this 2025 class. So definitely some work to be done, but it is maintaining those relationships, learning about a dude's family, asking them those little things. If you remember, something about their mom, their dad, something specific, you can ask them. And that's resonating with the kids. Dude, he remembered. And trust me, they don't actually really remember. They're looking down at, their notepad that they wrote a long time ago, or that their assistant wrote down. But it is about the effort that matters. And you remember those little things about a player, something he's got going on in his life. Those things can matter and make it feel like, hey, these guys really care about me. They are going to be, continue to do that, and it's going to be a family at that place. But it is really difficult, and it is heartbreaking when you put that much time into a recruit. And I've seen it, and the coaches are just crushed. It's not even about that they lost a 5-star player. It's like, I know this kid. It was like I almost coached him because I recruited him for so long, and now that's out the window.
But you never know. Like we
That,
hear from all the time from Penn State staff, you can't burn bridges. And not that they were in the business of burning bridges, but right now, a year later, it might surface in the transfer portal. 3 or 4 years later, it might show up in the transfer portal. A lot of people thought that Julian Fleming would never set foot in Happy Valley again when he committed to Ohio State and ended up there. And now here he is as a rising leader in the locker room for the Nittany Lions 4 or 5 years down the road. Landon, official visits. I know certain things that happen on official visits stay on official visits, but what can you tell us about the process? One, as a guest, as a high school prospect, making that trip up and what you experienced, what happened for these guys in June. And then secondarily, as a host, when you are assigned by the staff to a player, what is that weekend like for you and what are your kind of responsibilities?
Yeah, from a player standpoint, it's one of the most fun weekends that you have. First off, it's really cool because you get to get together with a bunch of guys from all around the country, and a lot of times you'll be in group chats, like you'll make Twitter group chats, whatever, Instagram group chats, and you all talk about how fun it's going to be, what you're going to do, etc. So that's fun, number one. And you don't even end up always going to school with all these guys, but there's so many dudes that I went on trips on, and they went to other schools, and I still have great relationships with them to this day just because we met on a trip. So I'd say that's the number one thing, just from a football standpoint, to build those relationships. It is really fun. But getting the air ride here, whatever it's first class, whether they come and send you a car and pick you up, you get here, your hotel room is no longer decorated, Tyler. I don't know if anybody knows about that rule, but my roommate, actually, Ibrahim Traore, he's an offensive lineman here. He told me he went to Toledo. He transferred out, and he said, I went there for my official visit, and they had all the pictures, the cake sitting for me in the lobby. I had to carry it up my own. The NCAA came out with a rule. You are no longer allowed to decorate the recruit's room. That used to be a thing. You can't do it anymore. But that, getting to the hotel, getting around the coaches, and then you have those great big dinners where that is where the hosts come into play, and you'll get a text. You might even get a text as late as Friday morning. You get finished with that 6 a.m. workout that I talked about, and you look at your phone, and Coach Trout says, hey, you got to recruit this weekend. And that can mean a couple of things. It's either it could be like, okay, awesome, or it's like, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about that. The one thing that I will say is cool. You get a stipend for your recruits. So you're able to give them, I think it's like $250. So you're able to get them Ubers, get them food as much as you want, like help them out with all that stuff. That used to mean a lot before NIL. It's like, okay, I got a little extra money. No, that doesn't really matter that much. 250 doesn't mean too much to too many guys anymore.
Before the NIL, it was all about the stipends in college. It was all about the stipends.
You would look at the sheet and they would have it like, how much is your stipend? I remember like Penn State's pretty far up there as far as the stipend. Doesn't really matter that much anymore. But so you kind of get to know each other. The host gets to meet the family. You get a feel of like, okay, what type of guy is this? What am I going to do with him afterwards? Are we going to, does he want to like see the nightlife a little bit, or do you just want to go hang out and play some video games? So you get that feel of the guy. But I think it's really important as a host is to really understand who the guy is, because the coaches are going to come to you afterwards and say, hey, what do you think of this guy? And I'll be honest with you, I had a ton of hosts and I had a ton of recruits, and I was the host. And multiple times I told the coach, hey, I'm not, I don't really know if this is the right fit for us. So like that is a real conversation. Like the coaches want you to be honest. They don't want you to just blow smoke and say, oh yeah, this guy's great. This guy's great. Like they want to know, what is this guy doing outside when we're not seeing that perfect, him, because that's the type of guy we're going to get when we're here. If he gets in trouble, he's going to get in trouble here. So there is that dialogue between the player and the coaches. Is this someone that's going to fit, our culture here? So that is a big piece of it. But a lot of times, and it's just having fun. A lot of the guys that are hosting, they will text each other and say, hey, let's all get together with the guys. Let's go to one of the pools and just hang out together. Let's get them all together, kind of we'll all play, pick up basketball, stuff like that. So it's definitely a fun weekend. And those June weekends, they are some of the most fun you'll have because, like you said, there's recruits. A lot of people are in town as far as football, and everybody's just hanging out, having a good time. But it is stressful for the coaches. They are running around trying to do everything, figure out every little way to pick someone up, talking to their families, getting acquainted with them. So it's definitely a hectic month, but it's fun for the players. And it's overall, I loved hosting. It was a good time. I still talk to a couple of my recruits that I had to this day that went elsewhere, and just building those relationships. I'd say that's the biggest thing from that recruit weekend for the recruits and the players. It's really a good time, but when you don't, and sometimes you get some commits too. That's a really fun part too. If you're a guy, I had one, I forget who it was. There was someone, I wasn't hosting it, but he told us that he was committing like the next day. And the host is like, this is the easiest thing ever. Like, come on. But it's a fun weekend, man. Everybody really enjoys themselves.
I just wanted to reemphasize something you said there, because I think a lot of people picture official visits, rolling out the red carpet, trying to kiss up to this kid and his family, and the kid is getting all the praise. And there's part of that, but there's also the evaluation process that's going on the other end. And like you talked about, the conversation between a player host and a coaching staff. What was this guy really like for the period of his visit that we weren't front and center for? And you want to protect your culture, and you want to build on your culture. And those are some underrated aspects of the official visit process. I think a lot of people think it's a one-way street with the player evaluating the program. There's a lot of program evaluating the player on these things too.
Yeah. Like, I mean, you bring a player up to a college town, there is opportunity. Like, there is that piece of it where it's almost a little bit of a test. Like, the host isn't always with them, and there's times where the recruit will go off and say, hey, I'm good, and the host is tired, whatever, I'm going to go back to my place. Like, there is that opportunity for a recruit to do some dumb stuff, to show up late the next morning, like when you wake up Saturday, the recruits, they go and do a ton of stuff within the facility. They get shown around. I mean, I've heard stories of recruits showing up late. I think you could speculate why they were probably late, and it's like, that's a huge red flag. I mean, obviously, if you have a verified offer and the coaches want you, but they might take a step back if something like that happens. So you're absolutely right. It is a bit of a test for the recruits on that weekend.
Love the conversation, Landon. I think our listeners learned a lot more about June, July here for the program, for recruits, for players. Let's finish with some forward thinking about what lies ahead in August as this team returns to the practice field. You've hit on a few key players, figures. You spent a lot of time talking about Andy Kotelnicki. What is the biggest question for you in terms of ultimately making or breaking whether this is the Penn State football team that goes through and reaches the college football playoff?
Yeah. I mean, I think the question is the offense as a whole. I think Drew Aller is definitely one of the biggest question marks. Can he take that next step to be an elite guy? I mean, you look at his numbers, he was definitely up there. He took care of the ball. I know a lot of fans felt like he wasn't taking enough shots, wasn't taking enough risk out there. But can he take that next step to really be one of those top quarterbacks? But like I said earlier, I really do think that because I think people are going to think because I'm an offensive lineman, I'm saying it, but we lost Hunter Norzad, Olu Fashanu, and Caden Wallace. We have to replace all those dudes. It is going to be interesting because Drew Aller, we've seen it. He struggles a little bit under pressure. I'd say that's one of the things he struggles the most with. Now, take away two of the best tackles in the country, add in two young cats, like that is going to affect the whole offense. That affects the run game. Are we able to get that going? Because if you can't get the run game going, now all the pressure goes on Drew Aller. We're sitting there at 2nd and 9, 2nd and 11. You're behind the sticks. You're not able to keep up and have that 2nd and 4 down, that 2nd and 3rd, that type of thing where your offense can stay on schedule. So the offensive line is the heartbeat of this offense. There has been a huge change. There's going to be a lot younger group of guys in there. How are they going to fare? For me, that is easily the biggest question mark that I haven't seen enough people talking about just because it affects everybody on the offense so significantly.
I think you're absolutely right about the offensive tackle position in particular. People aren't really realizing what that may mean to lose a guy like Caden Wallace. I mean, these bookends were playing at a level that at least I haven't seen covering Penn State. And I think there's people who have covered this team for a lot longer than I have that spoke very highly of that tandem last year. And then you take away the center and Hunter Norzad. I know you're very high on Nick Dawkins. I am too. When we look at maybe some younger ascending figures on the offensive line, which you know well, you want to call your shot for any breakouts? I mean, in terms of guys who are really, you think in 2024 are going to make a big name for themselves in the trenches on this offensive line?
Yeah, I got Anthony Donko. He's by far and away my dude. He actually he was kind of playing left guard. And this is one of the reasons why he is my candidate. Played left guard all years last year as a true freshman. We get to bowl prep and they say, hey, go hop out at tackle. And not only you're playing left guard, not only left tackle, but no, we want you to switch sides and go over to right tackle. And for anybody that knows, that is not easy for an offensive lineman if they're used to playing one side, not only switching positions, but switching sides too. He popped out there in the Peach Bowl, played the majority of the game. Caden Wallace played the beginning, and then he played the majority of it, and really was not much difference from how affected Drew Aller was. He really didn't have any pressures. I'm pretty sure he graded out actually as one of the best offensive linemen from the whole game. I am really excited to see what he's going to do. Kind of similar track, I think I talked about this before, to Olu Fashanu, where Olu started that first bowl game. Adonko didn't start, but came in, had a really, really good bowl game, impressed people in the spring. Didn't really get to see him in the spring game, got a little nicked up, but he's fine. Coming in at probably right tackle, I am really excited to see what he's going to do. But I do think one common theme that we have on this offensive line is depth. We have a lot of young dudes, and I think there is, if guys get injured, that is always happens on offensive line, especially in the Big Ten, but there is pieces to plug in. And guys, whenever you have guys competing at positions on the offensive line, that means that two deep is even stronger. A guy gets hurt, you're able to plug him in. But definitely look out for Anthony Donka. I think he's going to have a breakout year, and in 2 years be one of the top offensive linemen taken. I'm calling it right now.
The depth and the accrued talent in this room, Landon, for them to be able to lose these three guys and for us not to just assume it's going to be a calamity, which I think may have been the case 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Right now, it feels like they have the pieces. And I think right now people are really starting to trust Phil Trautwein more than they did a couple of years ago because of what's happened on the field for this room and the way they've kind of developed some of these younger recruits. And now that we're seeing them come to the surface on the field, across the trenches, there's a second-year player I know you've been yelling about from the rooftops for a while as well, and Nittany Lions. We have as well. What are you hearing and what have you seen from Lions that makes you feel like he is going to be a true threat for this defense off the edge? And generally speaking, who else are you really excited about on that defensive front?
Yeah, I have. That's all I've been saying, man. I can't scream it enough because I'm like I needed people to say you're a little right when he just breaks out this year. Because I've just watched him in practice. I actually got to go against him for a little bit when I was still playing, and he is just solid, dense, and has really natural hands. I think that's something that we saw in the spring game. We didn't get to see a ton of him his true freshman year, but the spring game, he had a really fantastic game. And I remember I was up in the booth pregame, and I was just looking down at him, and I'm like, he just looks like a dude. Like that's the type of guy you just want out there. I think and I've said this before, I think he's going to play a similar role with Nittany and Abdul being those starting defensive end. He's going to be that third guy. Think Nittany last year, how he was kind of that third guy for a decent chop, getting a lot of playing time, getting in on those third down rushes. Everybody's really high on him. I talk to the guys on the offensive line. They don't like going up against them because it's not easy, whether that's one-on-one in pass pro or you have to pull on him as a guard. It's like pulling into just a brick house. So I am really excited for him and another depth. That's what I keep kind of seeing at a lot of these positions, not every single position, but I think at some of these positions, we have some really good depth going on. So I am really excited about him, but overall, I think the fans have to be excited about Nittany and Abdul coming off that edge. I think definitely Abdul needs to take that next step with his hands and truly being a defined pass rusher, but he is simply just going to beat guys off the ball when they play a little bit of a lesser tackle. And even, we saw it against Michigan. They were they chop, and those guys were wreaking havoc, and that's why Michigan had to turn to running the ball 30-plus times in a row. I think we can have a similar impact with this defensive line that we had last year. So I'm excited not to have not too big of a drop-off when you have two of your defensive ends that are going very high in the NFL draft, and you're going to say, hold on, we're not even going to have that much of a drop-off, by the way. That is huge, and I'm really excited to see what Coach Barnes is going to continue to cook up with that defensive line.
I want to finish with this. You talk about depth. We've discussed the depth chart in the last couple episodes on this podcast recently, and that's really what's at the forefront in August for a lot of the fans who follow our coverage, listen to the podcast, read our stuff at Lions247. So much of it is about, well, how are things materializing at these different positions? What kind of tidbits are you picking up? What are you observing on the practice field? Who's working with who and what personnel? You've been engaged in a competition yourself for a starting role during preseason camp. You know what that's like. Is it something that every day you're very aware of? And how much does the staff from James Franklin on down to your position coach make you aware of where you sit on that depth chart as the month evolves? Or is it something where, hey, it's game week, here's the depth chart we got, that's where you are on it? Or is it more of a monitor day-to-day kind of scenario?
Yeah, it's day-to-day, and it's like you have one bad day, and it can switch up really quickly. So, during practice, we have, ones versus ones. We might go ones versus twos. Like, it doesn't – but you are – that subject is put on you, that label. It's like you're a 1 today, you're a 2 today. So when you're competing, and I remember like me and Hunter Norzad, when we were competing for left guard, like we would switch out reps. Like I'd get reps with the ones, he'd get reps with the ones. We'd switch off, and then we'd get some reps with the twos each. And it just kind of, you'd see, you have a really good day. The next day you get like 3/4 of the reps, and the other guy gets a quarter. It switches. He has a good, like, it is so fluid. And the coaches know, and yes, we know. Like, I was watching, and it's one of my best friends to this day. I was just hanging out with him yesterday, but like, I was watching every single one of Hunter Norzad reps, thinking, okay, like, what can I do better there? What did he do there? What do I need to do to improve on, on that type of rep? So yeah, there is constant just eyeballs on you when you are in a position battle and you feel that pressure. Like, I'll tell you, I remember the last scrimmage going in. So you have one last scrimmage, and then you go into a fake game week, where that week before the game week, the coaches want to get you out of that camp schedule and you get into that normal schedule. Well, we have that final scrimmage, that final camp practice scrimmage. And I remember sitting there like on the floor in my room beforehand, just like looking up at the ceiling, because I knew like it all came down to that scrimmage. It was like, however I graded out in that scrimmage, whoever graded out better, me or Hunter, was going to get the nod at left guard. So I was feeling a ton of pressure. And I actually went out, had one of my best practices ever, turned out. So that was good. But no, there is that feeling of like, dude, I got to perform today. And it feels like that almost every single day in camp. And then you start to stack some bad days and you start to get down on yourself. It's really easy to get down on yourself in camp just because it's so treacherous. You're not sleeping, you're tired. And you can start to go that other way where it's like, forget it, man. The coaches, blah, 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 whatever it may be. So you have to make sure you have to have that strong mental. And that's part of what the coaches are trying to put you through with camp. Like, it is just as much mental as it is physical. They know that it's a test. They know that it's hard. And they're trying to put you through that to see, okay, who are our real guys? Who are our mentally tough guys? Who can we count on 2 minutes left against Ohio State, fourth quarter? Who are the guys that are going to step up? Like, that is a reality of what camp is. So yeah, it's not fun at all, but it definitely brings the best out in you. And then, like I said, it creates a ton of depth that we have throughout the season.
Back in that 2022 competition, Landon didn't mention it, but he did get the starting nod. He did rotate a bit there with Norzad, started the first 5 games before an injury. And unfortunately, it pains me to say that that's the last chance we had to see you out there in a Penn State uniform. But I think you have landed a nice rebound situation for yourself. I'm so excited to get you on the podcast. We just spent an hour discussing things. Let people know where they can hear more of you, because you've got a lot of good stuff brewing with your podcast too.
Yeah, I am on basically all social medias. I post all my main content to YouTube. You can just look up Landon Tengwall on there. But I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, everywhere you think you can find me. You can find me. We're on Spotify for the podcast, all that type of stuff. Just Landon Tengwall. Come check it out. We're doing cool stuff with the players until we get into camp, and then going to kind of turn into some. We're getting into the season, man. It'll be fun. Hopefully, I'm gonna have Tyler on a couple times, and we'll chop it up and we'll have a good time. And I'm working on getting a press box too, Tyler. So you might see me up there for some home games, man.
You'll have to let us know what you make of the press box. There's always ice cream available.
I've been up there. It wasn't very impressive, Tyler. I'll tell you that. I was up there for the spring game. It was, definitely old. I think I am much more for the stadium renovations after seeing what that press box looked like.
Yeah, and you weren't even there the day a few Novembers ago, final home game, where none of the toilets were functional because it was too cold. So we had to go to take the elevator down to the next level. But I shouldn't say this. They're doing a lot of work at Beaver Stadium. I like my job. I enjoy covering Penn State games wherever we got to do it. And if we see you up there, it's going to be interesting. And I'm really curious how critical you may become this year. And now that you're fully locked in, last year you went really quickly from that transition. This year you've had a lot of lead up time. Are you going to be pretty critical? Or, you've got a lot of personal relationships. You're in a very unique situation compared to pretty much anyone else who currently hosts the Penn State podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that question, because I like to be honest. And the one thing I always want people to know is they're going to get full truth, honesty from me. Am I going to hold back a little bit on being too, mean, so to speak? Like, yes, because they are my guys. But am I going to tell you that something is, black when it's white? Absolutely not. Like, I'm not going to lie about it. But I'm planning on actually live tweeting the games. That's why I want to be up in the booth, because the connection down there is horrendous. So I'm hoping I want to live tweet and kind of just talk about what's going on. But no, I'm gonna give the full answer, man. I'm gonna be doing a pregame show. I'm gonna be doing a postgame show, and I'm gonna be giving the full raw truth. But definitely not going to be as harsh as some people. I don't think that'll ever really be my style, is to like rag on guys if they have a bad game. But if the offensive line has a bad game, I'm going to say they had a bad game and show you, where it happened. So I'm not going to, pull any shots there, but I'm not going to be dumping on guys, anything like that. But I am excited for the season and kind of what's coming. And it should be a lot of fun, Tyler.
Yeah, definitely. We'll try to get you back on the pod. There's always plenty to discuss. A lot of expectations in place for the program here in 2024. Really appreciate the perspective, the conversation as always. Really thrilled for you where you're moving on as a Penn State student and in the media realm as well. So keep up the great work, Landon. Always good to catch up with you.
Thanks, Tyler.
That's it for this episode of the Lions247 Podcast. Big thanks to Landon Tengwall for bringing back the curtain a little bit and letting us see inside team facilities, essentially, for what went down in June and July. We've covered a lot of ground on those months here on the podcast of late, but really just a different look from Landon. We'll be back with another episode soon, right here in the Lions247 Podcast. For now, I'm Tyler Donahue, stepping away. Check out our coverage anytime you'd like over at lions247.com.